Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to the Dawgland podcast. I am your host, Anthony Joki. As always, got my co-host Jackson McCurry alongside me. Jack, how we doing today, man?
Doing well, man. Just like this week, combine starting, off season's ramping up. It's got a lot of content. I think we can bust out here in the next couple weeks between the combine, between free agency, and all in all, man, life's good, man. How's it going for you?
Things are going pretty good. I had a couple days off here in a row, so kind of digesting all of the information we've gotten over the last couple days, and that's the majority of it that we're going to cover and talk about today. Andrew Barry spoke yesterday. Kevin Stefanski spoke today. So we're going to dive into what they had to say, as well as there were a couple of transactional moves that the Browns made that we'll kind of talk quickly towards the end of the podcast. But I guess the big thing, Jack, is Andrew Barry, Stefanski both spoke over the last couple days, and obviously they were asked about the ongoing situation with Myles Garrett after he requested a trade request. Andrew Barry uh, stated that Myles is a huge part of our organization and that their stance hasn't changed. Can't imagine a situation where not having Myles as part of the organization is best for the Browns. And Stefanski kind of echoed that. He said, I think the world of Myles Garrett. He understands the business aspect of it, but quote, I expect Miles on our team this year, the year after that, and the year after that. He's a part of our present and a part of the future. So, the Browns seem to not be wavering from their stance at all in regards to, the Miles Garrett trade request that, they don't want to move him. Uh, Makes a lot of sense. You have to wonder, what Miles thinks after hearing, those quotes today, after his trade request. So, where do you think this is all sitting at currently? Is this just a wait and see to how free agency goes, how the draft goes, until there's like a final decision made on both sides? Uh, you know, where do you see all this sitting at right now?
Yeah, I really think it's a wait and see. There's been a little buzz this week, talking to some people that, there is a potential contract on the table for Miles, which would make him the highest paid defensive player in the league. But I kind of think like what you just said, like, I think Miles is probably waiting to see like what are the Browns going to do in free agency? How are they going to attack the quarterback position? Because we know the ongoing rumors with Kirk Cousins. There's been some buzz about Matt Stafford, but with him wanting a brand new contract of 50 million plus per year, I don't know how the Browns can make that happen with the cap situation. So I think he's probably just kind of sitting back and seeing what is there a big move that maybe could sway Miles back, or is it just is Miles in it for the new contract? Was this his thing? Was this his ploy? Was this Clutch Sports' ploy to try to gain some maybe power, some more influence in the organization with Miles? And if this was their way to do it with him at requesting a trade, I don't think we're ever going to know the true details behind it all. But I feel like Miles will probably sit back, see what they're going to do here once free agency starts in 2 weeks, and then maybe reassess and think, man, the Browns are serious about this. I'll give it another run with them. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's pretty adamant that Andrew Barry has said, because like one of the quotes I saw was one of the reporters asked how many teams have called, and he was pretty much like, well, that's irrelevant because we're not interested in moving him. So I'm sure teams have called, but I think the Browns have really dug their heels and said they're not going to move him. Now it's just all up to what Miles is going to do next, and how that's going to be the another twist and turn in this ongoing saga.
Yeah, I would say if there's a team that hasn't called about the availability of Miles, they're not doing their job on their end. It would just make too much sense to if Miles requested trade to give a call to Cleveland to see, all right, what's it going to take, and kind of explore those talks. But yeah, I'm kind of I think it's wait and see. I think free agency is going to play a big part in this, especially when trades can start to go down. Especially, if we get a clearer picture before the draft, what the quarterback position is going to be, maybe you could see, things being resolved. But I honestly think that that's the biggest piece of this. Who's playing quarterback next year, and if it's a rookie, if it's somebody they trade for, etc. Um, you know, I think Miles will ultimately kind of dig his heels in at that point.
Yeah, I think it was it Kimberly Martin had said, she has heard that there was talk like Miles might, skip off-season mini camps. This might drag into training camp. I mean, we will see because we've seen guys dig their heels in. Brandon Ayuk did it last year. Debo Samuel's done it before. Um, I think what was it Jamar Chase skipped out on most of training camp, and he ultimately didn't get a deal. So some of these players have really dug their heels in, and have skipped out on training camp. Taken the fines. I think Hassan Reddick was only the really one that really like forfeited game checks until that situation resolved in the middle of last year. So we'll see how far Miles goes. He said it will be whatever it takes to get traded. So we'll see how this goes. But, you kind of hope that there can be some sort of resolution quickly so it does not turn into even more of a major distraction if he somehow is missing training camp and then if it somehow drags into the regular season.
Yeah, hopefully things are resolved by then, and we'll see on that front. All right, the other, I guess, major piece of news, in terms of Andrew Berry's press conference is he said that he expects running back Nick Chubb to hit the open market. Now, obviously, they weren't going to franchise him or anything of that nature. You have to wonder, where they are on any sort of contract talks, but I know it seems like, Nick wants to be here and wants to finish this out. He has said that in the past. Do you feel this is a situation where, they're letting him go test free agency and Nick will give them the opportunity to say, "Hey, this team offered me such and such a contract." He takes it to Andrew Berry and says, "Hey, this is what I've been offered. Will you match this?" Do you feel that's maybe where, this is going to go this offseason with Nick Chubb?
Yeah, I really do. I think, you know, it's probably where they've had talks. The Browns have kind of just told Nick and his representation that like this is where we see your value right now, but we're going to let you go out to the market, like you said, and be like, go see what your market is, bring us back an offer. If it's something we can work with, yes, we will match it. We will bring you back because I ultimately think they do want Nick a part of the organization, but at the same time, you don't want to overpay for a guy that's coming off back-to-back seasons of season-ending injuries. I think he's close to 30 if he's not hit it already. Um, but it's going to be interesting because like there's people that are like living and dying with this decision coming up, and I know like I love Nick Chubb. I know you do too. He's one of the best Browns since '99, but it's kind of it's I see it from both sides, like especially when it comes to the running back position, and especially with a guy that had a season-ending knee injury 2 years ago, a season-ending foot injury last year. Like you don't want to commit too much to him, but at the same time, you know how much he means to the organization, how much he means to those guys in the locker room. So it's a hard decision for Andrew Berry and the organization to make right now, and it'll be interesting to see who is going to be interested in his services. I know there's been rumors about him in Pittsburgh. I don't know how legit those are, and I don't even want to think about him wearing the black and gold. But when I look at other teams, Anthony, I really can't find a team like outside of maybe the Dallas Cowboys where it just makes sense for Nick to go play. Like I don't really see another team right now that makes a ton of sense for Nick Chubb outside of the Cleveland Browns, of course.
I mean, unless he wants to go be the second, third guy on a contender, and in that case, you're looking at Philly, you're looking at Kansas City, maybe you're looking at San Francisco, some of these other teams, that he could be the second, third guy and not really have to do a whole lot. He could take his time and getting back into recovering and the swing of things. After the injury that he sustained at the end of the season. So, I can see that, but I feel that he'll get whatever offer. Um, they'll bring it back to the Browns, and it won't be like a Shane situation last year with the Giants where he fumbled the Saquon Barkley thing pretty bad. I don't think Barry will do that with Nick Chubb. So, I think that they'll, as long as it's reasonable, a reasonable offer and reasonable contract, I feel that the Browns will match it. You heard in that piece that Nick Chubb wrote before he returned about how Barry came to him last offseason and really worked with him and tried to figure things out to bring him back last year. They stated how much he does mean to this organization and the city, the fan base as a whole. So uh, it makes sense that they'll probably work on doing the same thing this offseason.
Yeah, I would think so too. 'Cause Nick Chubb wants to be in Cleveland. Andrew Berry's been pretty loyal to players since he's become the GM. So I feel like they can work something out. Like I know Nick will probably go test the market. You mentioned some contenders. I actually was scrolling through depth charts real quick. Like the Chargers make a lot of sense because they're losing Dobbins. They don't have a lead back in their committee. So like I can see like that being a potential fit. You know, maybe the New York Giants or something. But yeah, I can't see a scenario where Nick Chubb's not back unless it's just he gets an offer that he can't refuse and the Browns just really don't want to overstep for him. And that would be a shame that it would come down to that, but I also understand the logic. At the same time, I won't like it personally, but just because Nick Chubb's my one of my favorite Cleveland Browns players of all time. But I just really hope that they work this situation out here in the coming weeks, and we don't have to worry about Nick Chubb playing for another team.
Yeah, I don't want it to be from our team. I especially don't want it to be in the division. Whether it's Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, definitely don't want that to happen. I don't know if that would be the case, but you never know when it comes to free agency and what teams are willing to offer. The other, I guess, big piece of news that came from Andrew Berry was sort of a non-answer, and that came in the form of linebacker Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and he was asked, if he's going to play next year. There really wasn't an answer given. I don't know if this has been something that really hasn't been talked about enough, because, if you're missing him in linebacker next year, that's a pretty significant hole that you have to fill this offseason. So if JOK is not able, to go, next year, after that injury he sustained, where does that leave, the center of this Browns defense?
Yeah, it'll be a big hole if JOK can't come back. I mean, Barry kind of said he's slowly getting better, but like you said, it's been really quiet. It hasn't really been discussed enough. I think. Like I know I've discussed it plenty in some group chats and stuff talking about him, but the quietness on it and the quietness since the injury, like they've been really hush hush on it. We know that he's been going around looking for second, third, fourth opinions with numerous doctors, and that just kind of makes you feel like it's not looking promising for JOK, and that's a shame because he was really blossoming into one of the best linebackers in football. Gets the contract extension last year, and then the injury happens, and it's really a shame. But like if he can't come back, then the Browns are looking for a linebacker, and they've really gone. They've really been looking more in the draft and looking for more like guys that can do specific things like they've had over the years. And like JOK ended up being the ultimate one because he could do just about everything in terms of, run stomper, coverage, pass rush. He could do it all as a linebacker. Now they just kind of go back into that committee role where they just look for guys that can do specific things. And, like Devin Bush played well, Jordan Hicks played well last year. But missing JOK would be a huge loss for that defense if he ultimately can't come back.
Yeah, it would be a huge loss. And there really isn't a plan B, at the moment, uh, in terms of linebackers. So, hopefully, he's able to get better and things are able to progress to where he can play next season. Um, One of the last things Barry talked about, and I thought this was interesting. So he talked about Travis Hunter a little bit, and he said that he views him as a wide receiver in the NFL, but also said, he's more than capable of playing corner at a high level in the NFL. I find that interesting because a lot of teams, it seems like, view him as a corner first, not a receiver first. What's your thoughts on Barry saying he believes Travis Hunter could be a receiver first in the NFL?
I did find that very interesting coming from Barry, who played corner in college and Obviously, he loves corners. We've spoken about that a lot on this podcast, but for him to say wide receiver first, I wonder if that's just being respectful to the guys that's in the room right now, like Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson, some of the other guys Barry has drafted, Greg Newsome, who's still technically on the roster, even though we expect him to get moved at some point this offseason. I think it's very interesting. I know Kevin today said, well, our offensive coaches want him to be a receiver, our defensive coaches want him to be a corner. Um, it it's all depends on like what he wants to do. I think if Travis Hunter is more comfortable playing corner, I think you should let him play corner full time and sprinkle him in at wide receiver. But if the Browns have a plan for him where he's going to play wide receiver the most of the time and sprinkle him in at corner as maybe like create a specific role for him in Jim Schwartz's defense, I think that could be something theoretically to get excited about. But like I heard the Titans GM yesterday said we value him as a corner first. So I guess it's all what these teams really value him as. I know Mel Kiper has said that he sees him as a wide receiver in Cleveland as well. So I guess it just depends on which team ultimately drafts him, what role they see for Travis Hunter. I think he was probably better as a corner than he was as a wide receiver, but we saw that he can do it at a high level on both sides at Colorado. So it'll be interesting to see. Ultimately, if the Browns picked him, I wouldn't say it would be a two. I think it would be in a trade down scenario. Once he finally got in the building, what ultimately his role would be with the Browns.
I had said a couple months ago, that he could definitely be like the Shohei Otani of the NFL, and I'd be curious if they could figure out a way, you know, where he's more of a specialist on offense and defense. In certain situations, yeah, you want him in there on certain plays on offense. In big moments, you want him in there on defense in big moments. Maybe it's the case where like he's on I won't want to say like a snap count, but he's kind of limited in the first half of games, and when it comes down to crunch time on offense and on defense, you could expect him being out there. You always it'd be rare in the NFL to have maybe your best player out there on offense and on defense when the game's on the line. Maybe that's something that they could look forward to with him.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting because there hasn't been anybody like him in the NFL to enter the NFL in a long time. Um, I I would just like to know, like, what would be their plan if once he got in the building? Just like we know what Barry said, Kevin said something kind of different. So it seems like, Barry, Stefanski probably wants him as a wide receiver too, but he said ultimately sees him as a football player. So I'm sure the coaching staff would probably be fighting each other trying to get him on one side or the other. But I don't know if he could play full time the way he did in Colorado. I know you were talking about like him being like a specialist on both ends and playing X amount of snaps on offense, X amount of snaps on defense. I think ultimately at the end of the day, he's probably going to be either a full time corner or full time receiver, and then perhaps sprinkle him in on both sides. But I don't see him playing significant snap counts on both sides of the ball. I just don't think the NFL is right for that, just because I think it's much more physical than the college game.
It'd be very curious to see how that does play out. And Stefanski said today, he said that the Browns have formally met with a few of the high name players, including Abdul Carter, Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders, other quarterbacks, Travis Hunter as well. Um, is there anything that you expect to come from these meetings, or obviously it's just kind of doing your homework here at the combine?
It's just doing your homework, getting to know the players. I think he met with Jonathan Jones, but Andrew Berry was talking about we've seen plenty of tape of these guys over their 3, 4, or 5 years of college. He goes, it's getting to know them and getting to see like their mental view of the game and trying to dig into that, which I think is pretty key, especially with the quarterbacks. When you're digging into Cam Ward, you're digging into Shador Sanders. They pull up a play, you have them go through it, see what they were, have them break it down for you, tell them what they were seeing on the play, and getting that mental aspect. Because as much as the physical traits matter for these quarterbacks, it's also like how do they break this play down? How do they view it? Like when times were tough on a certain play, like a third down or a key throw in a clutch situation, like how do they view the mental aspect of the game? And I think that matters just as much because, we saw Tom Brady, we've seen some of these other quarterbacks, like not all of them had the physical tools, but they were able to be cerebral in the mental side of the game. And that's what made them great. And I think that's probably what Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry, and the rest of the key decision makers are looking at when they're sitting down with these quarterbacks here at the combine. And, once they bring them in for their top 30 visits as well.
I thought it was interesting. I'm not sure if you saw this, but I saw on the Browns X account yesterday or the day before, they put out a video from the combine when Jerry Judy came out, and it was Stefanski and it was another scout. I couldn't recognize who it was.
I
Asking
think it
him.
was Chad O'Shea, the receivers coach.
Okay. Yeah, asking him questions about, something specific and, they gave him what they thought was like a hard question in terms of, the coverage and whatnot and why they did what they did on this specific play. And, he was able to get it. And I thought it was interesting how they asked him, what do you need to improve upon? And, he said, getting stronger. And he broke down into, um, were you always a weight room guy? Were you not? And he said he had to learn once he got to college that, he kinda had to be that. He needs to work on that into the NFL. It's interesting getting that sort of information from players, and I would imagine that's what the more majority of these meetings are, learning these players' strengths, weaknesses, and them being honest about themselves, about what they need to work on and things of that nature.
Yeah, very much so. And it's funny because they're only like 15-minute meetings, I think. It's only like yeah, I think they're only like 15, 20-minute meetings. So you have to cram a lot in that time and you get to interview pretty much any player, every player. So you got to cram it all in there, but you start to like build the relationships with these players because obviously you have your eyes on some of them. So you're getting to know them, you're laying the groundwork down for a potential long-term relationship between player and organization. So it's so fascinating to see these clips back because we know, like you mentioned, Jerry Judy, like we know the Browns coveted him for a long time and pursued him from the time he was out draft eligible all the way to when they brought him in via trade last year. So even if like, say they meet Shador Sanders today or this week and they don't like him, they're laying that groundwork for in 3 or 4 or 5 years. If he doesn't work out with one team and the Browns are quarterback searching again, they have that started their relationship with Shador. So if things don't work out with whoever they ultimately pick at quarterback and they have a chance to get Shador, the groundwork to that relationship's already there.
I'll tell you what, if we're still looking for a quarterback 3, 4, or 5 years down the road, we might have to finish this podcast, though, because I don't know if how much longer this could go on before, like, come on, like, I
You're not lying, man.
yeah. Alright, a couple, small things here before, we get out of here. Kevin Stefanski said that the Browns are not going back to Greenbrier, this season for training camp this season. And then they did release a couple players, legend Charley Hughlett, long snapper. He did suffer that injury that kept him out at the, end of the season. You have to wonder if, maybe he's going to, hang it up, call it quits, after this year. And they also released Juan Thornhill, which obviously did not work out how both sides expected it to. He didn't really happen to do a whole lot while he was here. Um, it's unfortunate, but sometimes these free agency signings don't work out. It's just like John Johnson before him. So I don't know what it is, but the last two guys they've signed for the safety position has not worked out well for them.
Yeah, it was disappointing to see that, Charlie Hewlett had to get let go. Been with the team since 2014. I think, as he said, it was 152 games as a Cleveland Brown. So yeah, I think he was the second longest tenured Brown behind Joel Bitonio. Was really great at being a long snapper. Obviously, I think he was the highest paid at one point in the by the Cleveland Browns in the league in terms of long snapper. So it's kind of sad to see that relationship come to an end. But as far as like the Thornhill signing, like I know I was excited when we brought him in a couple years ago, and he could never stay healthy, and he never really made any plays. So, like you said, it was disappointing. Free agency signing. It's disappointing that we had to post June 1st him. So we saved 3.4 million. We had to take some dead money hits, which We're seeming to take a lot more of those lately with some of the signings and trades and stuff that has happened the last couple years. But this is how the NFL rolls. Like you don't produce, you're gone. It's pretty much safe to say. Like I'm sure Juan will probably go latch onto a contender somewhere, and who knows, maybe turn back into the player he was in Kansas City. Like you said, it was disappointing signing that didn't produce. I know I was excited when he came, but it just ultimately never happened. So the Browns will keep searching for that ball hawking free safety because, like you said, the last couple have not worked out for us. And it's a shame because we had a good one back in the 2010s and Tashawn Gibson, and then ever since then we've been searching for one. So we're just gonna keep on searching.
Yeah, that's something that might have to come through the draft.
Yep,
There's limited money in terms of free agency for what they do have. Um, I know there's a couple guys out there, but I would imagine they're gonna have to try to draft and develop one as they move forward here. All right, Jack. Anything else before we want to tap out for today?
yeah, man. I think we covered all the news this week. Combine. I think the on-field stuff starts this week or tomorrow on Thursday. So got a weekend full ahead of watching some of these prospects, seeing how they test. I know Math Bomb on X is probably gearing up because he's going to be busy pumping out those relative athletic scores, and hopefully this time next week we can break it down and see who helped their draft stock and who hurt it.
I want to say it starts tomorrow and it goes through Monday. I think like the offensive linemen are last on Monday. Offensive,
I
defensive
believe you're right.
uh, linemen are done on Monday. So be a lot of fun to watch as it always is. The wide receiver 40-yard dash is always kind of the fun thing to pay attention to, obviously. And then we'll see what quarterbacks do decide to throw, this weekend as well. But until next time, we'll be back to cover all of that and hits on some of the major topics from the combine that we learn about. Um, he's Jack McCurry. Be sure to give him a follow at Jack McCurry 08. Give me a follow at Anthony Jokey, Jokey I. Follow the Dawgland, on all the platforms at the same handle there. And until next time, always remember, go Browns.